Good evening, and welcome to Artist Talk on Art on Monday, March 7th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm Doug Shear, President of ATOA. Tonight's panel is called Navigating the Art World Now and is intended to assist artists in building and enhancing their career post-COVID. The panel was organized by Jacqueline Sferra-Rada and Peter Duhon. Your questions may be shared toward the end of the panel with the panelists and Peter. Peter will see them in the Zoom chat box at the bottom of your screen. Comments made by tonight's panel are their own and not necessarily those of ATOA. The program is being recorded and copyrighted by ATOA. It will be posted to our YouTube channel. Just a note about next week's dialogue, March 14th. On the next Monday, you'll see a dialogue between myself and my former co-founder of Artist Talk on Art, Lori Antonacci, interviewed by critic and author A.D. Coleman, which will look at the founding, the history, and the legacy of Artist Talk on Art now in our 48th year, and including some never before seen photographs and other materials. Our moderator tonight is Peter Duhon. Peter is a contemporary art curator, writer, and collector. He's also the founder of the art blog, Art Comments. He is an ATOA board member and previously served as ATOA's programming director. He will introduce our two panelists, Marina Grainger and Audra Lambert. Peter.
Peter, you're muted.
Okay, first off, I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's session, and I think you will find the session invaluable. We have two great guests, and I'll actually let them introduce themselves. We have Audra, has worked in the gallery space and worked as a curator and as a writer for many years. And then also Marina, she's been in the art world for approximately 15 years as well, and different avenues. And she also has her own art advisory practice. And today, essentially what we will do is tackle basically the strategies for dealing with the art world and the pandemic, and just all the different changes and the ramifications, and what does that impact look like. But without any further ado, I would like Audra and Marina, you have to introduce themselves and tell us what they've been up to and what they're doing.
Should we go alphabetically? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everyone. It's really lovely to see so many faces here this evening. So my full name is Audra Verona Lambert, and my pronouns are she, her. So I hold an MA in art history and visual culture from Lindenwood University. I also have studied at City College of New York, here in New York City as well. I worked independently now as a curator since 2016, which makes it about 6 years ongoing, and I've organized around 12 or 13 exhibits in that time throughout the 5 boroughs. Also, I run Anti-Mag and Platform. So through that, we host some open calls for artists to exhibit, to exhibit and to be featured, as well as we host a series of regular exhibition reviews and some interviews, etc. Also through that, I am the residential exhibition organizers, or the curator in residence for the yard at Williamsburg Bridge, where I am right now. And we have a show up right now, which is work, primarily paintings by Mija Jung, and also Gabrielle H. Weiss. It's called Les Choses Mortes. That's up through mid-April. I also head Amos Eno Gallery, and I'm a founding member of the 9th Street Collective, which some of you may be familiar with, and we work to empower artists in their career. So with that, I'll hand it over to Marina.
Thank you so much, Audra. I am so honored to be here tonight with you, with Peter, and with this institution. And I'm so happy to see all of these familiar faces and all these new faces. Thank you. First of all, I think it's important for me to tell you that I came here as a Soviet Jewish refugee at the age of 7 from Kiev, Ukraine. So it is a crazy time for me right now. But I always wanted to be in the art world, and I earned a bachelor's degree in art history from Pace University in New York City, and then a master's degree in art history and museum studies from the City College of New York. Now, I was working in galleries since 2004. And lastly, I was a gallery director for nearly 7 years at a big gallery on 57th Street. We participated in art fairs in Miami, in New York, and abroad. And I really loved working there, but I really didn't like to see artists get the runaround. Now, not everybody in the art world gave artists the runaround, but I was really moved by something that Ivan Karp once did when I first met him from OK Harris when I was like 18 years old. And that was, he gave advice to an artist in his gallery who just walked in off the street. And I was so moved by that when I found myself in a position to start my own business, I decided to start a company called the Artist Advisory, which I founded in 2018. And so helping artists has been my full-time job with this business since 2018. I'd love to speak to you all and answer all your questions.
I'm not
Peter,
sure. I'm not sure how you're going to work this, Peter, but
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, we're good.
jump
All
in.
right, so anyway, so yeah, we'll start out with the questions. We have about a few questions first, and then we'll open up for the audience. So the first question for Marina and for Audra, since the beginning of the pandemic, we've witnessed various paradigm shifts, if you will, or certain types of activities intensify and or accelerate. And one of those areas is that of curation. And I'm curious if you all could maybe speak to that. Have you seen that shift or not? Or yeah, perhaps Marina, you could start us off if you want. Mute.
Remind them they need to unmute.
She's on mute, yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you. I'm going to get the hang of this by the end.
We'll do it together. We'll figure it out.
Okay, great. It's so interesting. One of the biggest shifts that I've seen, and I really, I want to nod to Audra for this as well, because she has been working as an independent curator far longer than I have. So she's going to have a really interesting perspective on this. But I'll start off by saying that I did some independent curation when I was working in the gallery world. I recently was reminded that I did an exhibition for the Brooklyn Arts Council Gallery in 2011. But the biggest shift was, to me, and from what I've observed, is that artists would be found through word of mouth much more often prior to the pandemic, and more so in their immediate communities, more in person. And now that we've been forced to look on our screens more than anything and kind of been forced to retreat into our homes, I think that a lot of curators and gallerists that I know are finding artists more and more through the channels of social media. And one thing that really sticks out at me. I was recently speaking to a gallery director, and while she finds artists on social media, she will not go and approach an artist unless they have been working for at least 10 years. And this to me is kind of a new thing. I haven't heard this before. And I think a lot of it is because in a way, you just want to make sure that this artist is consistent and that they're working. If so many people can go on social media and just say they're an artist, right? So I think that's one of the biggest shifts I've seen.
Yeah, I think, first of all of those things, and I just want to again kind of echo all of the points that we already heard as well from Marina around presenting your work through either social media or some form of a screen, right? Like we're all mediated by the screen now. So you have to have a very strong presence in terms of your digital formatting and also the strength of the imagery of your work that you're presenting. I had sort of thought of this question through two lenses, or perhaps with like two different hats. So one is more as a curator, but one's also like as an observer, or perhaps as like an arts writer. So I had two specific sort of studies that I was, hi Fran, that I was considering. One of those is a rise of the artist as a mediator. So in this sense, like an artist as a curator. That's been happening a lot more when artists are seeking out just really opportunities for themselves and to show perhaps their colleagues. I think that was already happening pre-pandemic, and I think that's only strengthened sort of in the wake of that. So one example is I recently went to House of X in the Public Hotel, and there's a show there called Exhibitionist, and it's actually so it's an artist who's the curator, and I'm happy to send that info later, but I don't want to harp on that too much. The idea here being that it's an alternative space for exhibiting perhaps installation work in this case, but again, the idea being that you have almost like this, it feels like an expanded field for shows, for actually exhibiting artwork. It's not only in a white box gallery. And once again, I think that already was happening pre-pandemic, but I've seen just really a much stronger showing of that. The other obviously being, and I would say this more through the lens as like the curator as opposed to the observer, because I was invited to that as a venue. But as a curator, I've seen a lot more opportunities, especially for those of us who are working independently, or if we get invited to jury, to have an exhibition online, right? We've all seen this kind of a spate of online exhibitions. I'm actually super curious from kind of a reflective or analytical standpoint to see how this holds up as we really start to reopen and force. So I think that'll be something intriguing. Watch this space, but certainly having online,
She doesn't realize everyone can see her.
Maybe I think it's like
Fran.
Fran
Hi,
can
Fran.
mute herself. Can someone mute Fran?
Thanks. So yeah, so having online exhibitions has really risen, I would say, in prominence and also kind of in seriousness as well. I think there was this idea pre-pandemic that if it was online, it was more frivolous or it wasn't as serious. And I think that now we're seeing just really how serious they are able to be. Something else as well, which maybe at some point we'll hear more from Peter, but there's also a rise in what format that art is presented in. So for example, if you happen to be an artist who's moved into like say the NFT space, the means of exhibiting that has to shift obviously according to the format. So that's something else to keep in mind.
No, that's so true. And what's interesting too is this whole notion of alternative formats and alternative spaces. What do you think are some of the challenges that these alternative spaces represent, like the challenges and even the risk and of course the opportunities, but yeah, what are some considerations?
So Marina's worked in the commercial gallery space. Are you okay with handling that one first? Because I'm sure some things immediately come to mind for you with that. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest challenges, I'm actually friends with Kath Riles, who is the curator in House of X. And one of the biggest challenges with these alternative spaces is protecting the work. you know, when you that on like a logistical level, because people aren't used to being around artwork in a nightclub, right? So protecting the work is one of them. But secondly, as someone who has worked in a commercial gallery space, worked in museum before as well, and studied museology, is getting people to look and understand the context of the work. Because while, you know, one alternative space is exciting, like House of X, right? It's a nightclub that is showing artwork. The primary function of the space is not necessarily to show art, but to be art inspired. So you are going to have some sort of loss in understanding the context of the work, unless you really navigate. I mean, well, I don't know how you could do it really well, because I'm thinking, you know, you can't have wall text, can you? I don't know. Would I read that in a nightclub? Maybe. But also, you know, looking away from the challenges, alternative art spaces are amazing. It's so great to be able to almost democratize art that way, because so many more artists can show their work, so many more people can see it, right? Museums and galleries can traditionally be a little bit intimidating for people. And what's special as well, kind of hearkening back to your very first question, that I totally just popped into my mind when Audra was talking about House of X. 10 years ago, it would be such a weird thing to see an artist curate themselves or curate an exhibition. But now it is amazing to see it. And I'm so interested in seeing artists curate shows. I wonder, you know, that is a big one for me. So, yeah.
And Audra, do you have any?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I am here at the Yard Williamsburg Bridge. It's one of a few different sites around the city where they have art shows on a regular basis. I am responsible for my own insurance. You always have to ask. I know spaces, I'm not going to at anyone or explicitly mention any names, but there are spaces in the city where you can certainly show your work and they may not be insured. So that is a very, very important part of working with an alternative space or venue. Like sort of in addition to having the artwork be fully protected, right? And I think every artist has kind of a comfort level among those things. Perhaps you work, or like say perhaps you work as a fiber artist, that may be very different from working as like in ceramics, right? So I think just having that in mind. I also wanted to mention too, I don't know why I wasn't going to say this, there are some opportunities. You have a range of galleries throughout New York City and really throughout the US, where as an artist, you can actually serve as a board member, or you have some ownership over the space and you have a regular exhibition program. I'm sure you are familiar with some of these spaces. I actually run one. It's Amos Eno Gallery. It's in Bushwick. So the artists are fully vetted. They have to be fully approved through the membership in order to hold a role with the gallery. And then you have, say, more control. I think a challenge there is that you run into visibility issues just because of the level of, I would say, the heightened sense of like maybe the competition that you get when you're up against like a gallery that has more funding or just has like a little more of an investment. Yeah, really, I would say reflexively the word funding is probably what emerges immediately. But I think at the same time, you have the option of kind of having the art read in the space as you will. I remember reading, I think it was 7 Days in the Art World. This is a little older. This is a book from maybe 6-7 years ago. Yeah, it's very eye-opening. But
yes.
Yeah, there was one scene where she explains how she was in like the super high power, like a gallerist, I think it was like their Chelsea office, and they had an artist who was a well-known artist at the time kind of walk in and they said, oh, okay, so we just want sculpture from you this time for the art fair. And the artist was like, oh, but I made all of these new works and I wanted to walk through. And like, no, like we've seen like one on your website. We just want 6 more of those. And I was like shocked. I mean, I was very naive at the time. I was only starting my master's journey, but I was kind of shocked at like the level of hierarchy, for lack of a better word, or just kind of like really the power dynamic that existed there. And I think maybe in response to that and some other factors similar to what you've already heard from Marina, I really have seen that my calling is in working one-on-one with artists, which is a big part of my work at Amazino. So yeah.
Okay, got it. And it actually looks like one of the questions from the audience actually connects to actually the next question that I had, and that was the shift we've seen with social media. And again, before the pandemic, and the use of social media by artists was often what I would call measured, if not just considered crass at times by different people. So I am curious, like what you all have observed, and is it crass to have a social strategy, if you will? Go ahead, please.
So I know Marina handles this full time, but I feel like I've had to punt the ball to her several times. So I will leave with this one because my answer is pretty short. So one of the things I was really thinking about in terms of an artist, of their presence on social media, for me, generally, by the way, that reads as Instagram, it can read as many things for many people, right? So it could be,
yep.
Yeah, so it could be having a presence on Twitter. It could mean that you are like wanting to move into TikTok because you just want the views. You have a range of options available to you, but two things I thought were important is to have a sense of your audience and to structure the content around who's viewing the work or your goal, right? Like maybe having a higher follower count is not the same goal as wanting to see sales, right? So having a goal and then like structuring who is ideal kind of in terms of who's viewing the content around that, and either having a plan or perhaps working with someone that has a plan and is familiar with the medium. So the last thing I would say to do is just hop onto a new platform and start kind of throwing stuff out into the world because it may backfire. So those are two very important things. And then I wanted to mention again, kind of an example to follow. So on Instagram, I forget, and I will throw it here into the chat, but someone like say maybe like a Chloe Wise is one artist who uses Instagram I'll say very thoughtfully, right? So you kind of, it's like you see her lifestyle and you see her art and you see the exhibitions that she's going to, but also hanging out on her friends' yachts or heading to a new show or at an art fair, as opposed to someone like like I had here, like a Julie Meritou, who only really posts about either exhibitions or lectures, etc. So having a strategy and just kind of sticking to it and just really having the consistency across what you post really goes a long way.
Yeah, Audra, 100%, yes. Everything you said. I also gotta say, to answer Peter's question, I've worked with artists of many different generations, actually, and I am under the impression that artists who are from an older generation have been taught that it's crass to self-promote in any which way, right? That it's kind of like frowned upon. So how many of you, just by show of hands, how many of you have heard this? I don't know, I'm putting you guys on the spot, okay? And it's so interesting because nowadays, if I worked with an artist, I'm going to give you a little anecdote. I worked with an artist who taught maybe young adults how to make pottery, like ceramics. She was a ceramics artist. And I went into a session with her after she did one of her final classes for a big workshop she was teaching. And she goes, Marina, can you believe it? These kids, they've learned pottery for 5 weeks and now they're selling their work online. I can't believe it, and look, while it is a totally different thing than probably what many of you are making, the point of the point here is that it's okay to self-promote on social media. That is just the way that we communicate now. And self-promotion could feel empty, but what makes it so special is when you share something educational about your artwork, then you no longer feel like you're just self-promoting, you feel like you're sharing information. And that's what social media is about, sharing information. How many of you go on Facebook, for example, and then end up clicking news links, right? That was like a big thing, right? So we're really on social media to learn and to connect. And as long as you do this organically, meaning authentically to yourself, it's going to feel good and it won't come across as crass. So I always tell artists that I work with to make note of their bio, right? Look at the bio you have, your profile on Instagram, for example, or on Facebook, right? How many of you prefer Facebook over Instagram? No one. How many of you prefer Instagram? I do. All right, we'll talk about Instagram. But if you look on Instagram on your bio, look at your profile picture, make sure it's clear to others that you're an artist. Hold up your work of art or stand next to it. And if you have a really strong intention behind your work, put that in the bio, in like a little simple clause, whatever it is. Like focusing on the details or psychology through color, right? Or something like that, right? And always start, there was a question about hashtags, like which hashtags to use. Yeah, and one of the that's the biggest question I think I get. It's so important for you to use hashtags that are relevant to the themes in your artwork. Don't just use hashtags related to painting, or if you're a painter, or sculpture, if you're a sculptor. If you are interested in themes on psychology, science, quantum physics, sacred geometry, use those hashtags because they're going to connect you to an audience that authentically relates to those themes, and therefore it'll grow your audience, right? So as long as you're sharing information, it's not crass, right? That's my thought on that.
Hearing Marina too, I just wanted to throw in, like, it's a two-way street, right? So even though you're posting, it should also be like in addition to having a focus on audience building, you should also be liking and following other people that are also very directly engaged with your subject matter or your interests as well. Helps everybody.
100%. And I have to say, I worked with an artist who has such a brilliant story. She started just engaging with artists online and posted that she was going to be in Barcelona, right? She was from Los Angeles. And one of the artists that she was engaging with online threw her a party, okay, in Barcelona to celebrate her and her work, because I think she was showing in a group show there or something like that. But it's not just the collectors you should be after, it's the community. So that includes other artists. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much for those excellent answers. So it looks like we have a couple of people who raised their hands, Jessica and Kate. So we have just a couple more questions, then we'll open up to the audience. But if you want to put the question in chat, I'll grab the question there as well. Okay, so just 2 years ago, most residencies required a physical presence or a relocation of some sorts. And I was thinking about this. It was like a stranger in a strange land, but it doesn't have to be a strange land. You don't have to be a stranger, or maybe an exotic land. At any rate, how should artists approach residencies now? Have there any changes there, or what are the thoughts there?
Yeah, so I've seen some kind of expanded offerings. So a lot of times now, like I'd say in the past, again, kind of 2 years, you can See, that's pretty consistent. There have actually been a few residencies. Obviously, several of them had to either fully cancel or they had to postpone. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know or haven't seen, but something else that's happened is that you have kind of like this online format where it's a Zoom and you can show up, and it's more of like even a development perhaps on the conceptual end of your work and on the formal. But I have seen kind of a shift towards more like, how are you presenting the work that you're making in terms of the ideas already in it, or that you hope to kind of explain through your work. So one is the Oxbow Residency. They've had, I think, 2 solid years now of online. And something else to think about too is you have, and I mean, again, some things were already online and they've sort of, in the wake of the pandemic, it's sort of accelerated. So for example, I think we're going to talk about this after, but in terms of maybe professional development, you have a lot of maybe low-res MFA programs now as well. So in the past, when you had to relocate, that's not required as much anymore. If you're not interested in perhaps the MFA structure, there's a whole other layer of professional development opportunities, but I again don't want to accidentally jump forward a question. So just specific to residencies, you have some that are available that either perhaps in a dual or even an online format. Something else too is I've seen, okay, this is very important. I've seen a sharp increase in residencies in the past 6 months, where I think they're stepping in to maybe fill a, like it seems like a perception that there's a gap, or perhaps because everyone's had to maybe wait on hosting residencies until it's actually perceived to be safe. They've had like a lot of smaller residencies that maybe only have like between 2 to 4 artists at a time. I've seen at least 5 in the past 6 months, again, that have started. So what's important with that is, if they're new, you want to go on to something like a Rate My Residency or a Res Artist, or somewhere that you're able to vet the program, have a look at their website, see on the About page who started it, what are their credentials, right? So I think perhaps because of a dearth of residency opportunities, or higher levels maybe of the competition that have happened since around 2020, you may want to seek out some opportunities that seem perhaps slightly more attainable. But on the flip side, you want to make sure that whoever is hosting it or helming it or who started it is actually vetted. So I'm happy to throw some websites here in the chat that will offer you that opportunity to make sure that it's a solid move for you as an artist in your career.
Yeah, that's really good. Those are all really, really good points. I stand behind them. Everything you say, Audra. I also want to say just this idea of virtual residencies has offered so many more artists that normally aren't able to do a residency, the opportunity to do a residency. And so I think that's kind of one of the biggest ways one of the best takeaways that if I was going to be really optimistic about this pandemic, it is one of the best things that kind of came out of it, because there are artists out there who maybe don't want to travel and leave their homes for a month at a time or something like that. So having this idea of a virtual residency is really interesting. Now, I'm not an artist, so I don't know how they work, right? In a way, as how easy it is to present your work and get feedback online, but I know that it's possible, right? The most important thing from my point of view about a residency is not necessarily creating the work. I know this is really controversial, me saying this. It's not really creating the work. It's not really the professional development. You know what it is? The most important part of participating in a residency is making connections, learning from other artists, but also getting eyeballs on your work that otherwise would not see your work. And that would bring you opportunity. So whether it's in person or virtual, I think it's 100% necessary, right? And a virtual residency seems awesome to me, right? Has anyone here done a virtual residency? I'm curious. Vicki, did you? No. No, please raise your hand. Awesome. Well, and the other question was alternative professional development, correct? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, it does look like someone, Debbie said she's joined a residency. I don't know if she wanted to. But
Oh,
go ahead,
yeah.
Debbie.
Yeah, that's actually a great resource. Debbie just pointed out, she joined resartist.org. And I believe they list residencies, but then it looks like Audra has the Rate My Residency in the chat as well. Oh,
Right.
great. One of now, of course, I have a program for professional development for artists, and it's very business minded, but I have to say, one of the most interesting programs I have seen out there, I don't know how much I've been plugging this program. I think it's really, really interesting. It's the New York City Crit Club. And I think it's so interesting because you don't have to shell out the investment for an MFA to get an MFA level crit of your work. And so there are professors and really well-known artists participating in this program. And it's been pre-pandemic, it was in person, and now it's virtual, which has helped artists from all over the world work with this program. But I think it's so interesting that you can use these online professional development programs to connect with artists from everywhere, and artists in a really high level as well. And of course, I gotta say, when I do my professional development program, I always invite outside experts because as much as I want to know everything, I don't.
And when you say outside experts, what type of experts do you bring in?
Oh, so I have brought in art consultants, gallery directors. I have brought in other social media experts who are also artists. So they have a slightly different point of view on everything, broader sense. And at the end of every single one of my programs, I always have artists introduce themselves to two experts who are either curating or can curate them into a show or have the ability to move mountains for them. So that is kind of, that's something that I picked out from, I can't do a residency, right? I can't offer a residency, but that's something that I thought was really interesting. When artists do residencies, usually there's open studios afterwards, right? And these residency directors or whoever invite gallery directors and curators over to meet these artists. So that is something that I'm a big proponent of doing in my program. Yeah. Oh, and Babs is asking the name of the crit group. It's the New York City Crit Group, NYC Crit Club.
I think it's NYC Crit Club. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And something to echo there and everything that we've heard is know who you're working with. If it's a residency, see who the jurors are. If it's a foundation, see who's on the board. If it is a crit club, see who's going to be part of that specific one, right? Like there's multiple iterations. So see who you'll be working with and how they're going to advance you. You could even really super dig deep, see if the artists who were at the residency a year ago have shown since then. See who they've had by to see the artist's work. If it's a virtual residency, see who they've had as their guest, right? So you want to kind of dig and you want to do your research to make sure that you're making an informed choice from the perspective of who you are as an artist and how you make work, but also an informed choice from a financial perspective. And to that note, I'm going to plug as well the 9th Street Collective, and I'll throw it in the chat. We have our workshops actually start at a super, super affordable price point. They are, however, highly targeted to certain subject matter. They're each about an hour long. They're under $30 if you book early. So that is also available to you as well. I would be remiss as a founding member if I didn't mention, we also do one-on-one hourly and also 90-minute versions of our consultations as well. But for a very specific example of what I've already said, you can head straight to the website and see all of our bios. For me, sort of an alarm or like a warning bell is if you go to a website for an opportunity and they ask you to pay, but they don't say who they are. That's a little bit of a red flag. So that's my parting advice. And I'll throw that link into the chat.
Okay, great. And so it sounds like, Audra, you're echoing Marina as far as like different options for professional development, and one of them being workshops and having someone like look at your work and critique. And
yeah, it's really about your goals, right? So if your goal is to, like, for example, everything that you already heard from Marina about wanting to have the MFA level experience of having feedback on your work, then having something like a crit club is important. If you're really good at making the work, but not so great at maybe either promoting it, or perhaps you're not familiar with how to run a virtual studio visit, we have workshops on those kinds of things. So just making sure that you are actually aligning all of your goals with a strategic forward-thinking path and a method that's going to serve you, once again, kind of from the perspective as an artist who's investing in your practice, but also the word investing being a financial point. So, yeah.
oh, great guidance. Appreciate it. Okay, and then also too, we're going to open up, to like some questions from the community. But first question, just really curious, do you all have any upcoming exhibitions or projects or events that you're excited about? It could be personal or it could be something else, but if you could share that with the group, that would be, I think, really great.
Do you want to start it?
Sure. I feel so lucky this week that I'm doing this. And I'm also going to be doing an artist comfort corner at the Superfine Art Fair in Miami this weekend. So that is one big event for me, where this art fair has opened so many doors for artists because it allows artists to participate without a curator on their own. And so I'm just speaking to some of the artists there. They have individual appointments with me, and I have created a comfort corner for them, which is very much my vibe.
Yep.
But also, and I'm seeing so many faces here that have participated in this program. I have a 4-month online group program that is starting in May. Again, it's called the Artist Academy. And if you've done the program, maybe you want to put it in the chat. Let me know if you liked it. Got some thumbs up.
Some feedback.
And that is the program that I was talking about. I primarily work with artists in a group setting where I teach them not only how to navigate the art world, but how to navigate the digital world with their art, and how to build a website, how to post better on Instagram. There's tech tutoring that you can have with this program as well, and really connect. So yeah, hi Allison, thank you. Oh, and hi Colleen. Okay, so yeah, that is what I do. That's what I have going on immediately in the next kind of 2 months. And I'm also relaunching my podcast. So I would love for you guys to tune in. It's called the Artist Advisory Hotline. And it's a podcast where I interview art world experts. And hopefully we'll have Audra on sometime too. That would be a really good fit.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. Well, please paste like a link in the chat so people can subscribe to it and copy and paste it. And then we'll move on. I guess, Audra, how about yourself? What do you have upcoming?
Yeah, I wish I was going somewhere
about?
warm like Miami. I mean, it's warm here today, but it's windy as hell, right? Yeah, I actually just had an open call that wrapped, so I cannot plug that. However, I have a few visiting appointments upcoming, so I'll be going to Jersey City. They have an art and studio tour, so it's a full day of reviewing artist portfolios there. which is fun because I went to my undergraduate there, so I'm excited for that. I also have the exhibition up right now that I mentioned here at the Yard. It's called Le Show Mort. It's right by the Williamsburg Bridge in Brooklyn, not Manhattan. And I have an upcoming solo show that I will be curating opening April 19th of artist Anna Surendran. So I'm super excited about that. And in the meantime, I have 4 workshops upcoming this spring through Ninth Street. So it's going to be exciting. It's a mix of in-person and virtual, and I'm hoping to see even more in person as we enter 2022. So I hope to see some of you at the workshops. And if any of you happen to live in Jersey City, perhaps I will see you in April. Sorry, Peter, I think we're missing you again.
Yeah.
All right, so just awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And so we have a question, I guess a couple of questions from the audience. We'll start taking them. Kate, she's asking, my gallery has closed up their physical space. Now that the dust seems to be settling, does anyone want to address how much the art world may have shrunk during the pandemic? I don't know if any, yeah.
Real talk. I think
Right.
Somehow it has managed to both expand while contracting. So again, like this kind of, like you have a range of more kind of alternative opportunities. I know artists who are hosting small group visits. There's a few more tours that have started to kind of open up, perhaps in lieu of, say, having a studio as part of an MFA or like a BFA program. There's a wider range. I know some of you here know the New York Artist Circle, right? There's kind of these other groups where you can also join and share your work. I already mentioned as well this idea of having your work perhaps in a gallery that you are partly an owner of. So again, I think there's kind of a wider, like almost a sense of an elasticity or like survival mode of the art world. Like I have to say, when the pandemic started is when I started at Amos Eno, and the number of submissions increased like probably close to 200% from what happened under my predecessor. So yeah, in terms of contracting though, I think we've all seen this, and this was already happening pre-pandemic. All the big fish at the top are the ones who are succeeding, right? So it really, really starts to put pressure on smaller galleries, some of whom have learned how to share space. You have like a gallery upstairs, one downstairs. A lot of folks have moved, and some people only work in art fair format now. So that is, if you haven't seen that already, it's something that you're going to encounter a little more. Maybe they have a private advisory and they work with art fairs. So one suggestion I would like maybe sort of take from that is heading to somewhere like a Volta, having these one-on-one sort of just super friendly encounters, meeting some of the dealers there, seeing if they have a physical space or not. Like you could think of it like a research project or like a reconnaissance where you're learning more about how people are actually moving and selling work. So while it has expanded, I think the ways in which it has slightly like maybe folded in on itself is where you see more disparity. But then I again would encourage you to meet some art dealers one-on-one, perhaps in a fair environment, to learn more about how they're sustaining themselves and what formats they are actually selling work in now.
Great insights.
I would love to add to that. First of all, I think that online opportunities are real. Okay, so if your gallery is closing or maybe just doing virtual shows, maybe they're only going to do art fairs going forward, they're still functioning as a gallery. They're still probably going to sell your work. And I've also worked with artists who have put on virtual exhibitions using platforms like, for example, Kunstmatrix, and have sold thousands of dollars worth of work. Now, they put a lot of work into it. It doesn't just happen with the snap of a finger, but it's still possible, especially when the gallery has that collector list. But I agree with Audra in that while it's contracting, it's expanding at the same time. And something that I'm going to predict here and now on the record, okay, is right now, so many retail spaces are closing. So many retail spaces are closing. And especially when this happens, then the rent goes down enough to invite more art spaces. So I am going to predict that in the next 10 years or so, we're actually going to see an influx of in-person art spaces. And I would suggest looking at the Tribeca neighborhood in New York City. Hi, Jeff and Carolyn, who are right there. And as a little bit of a mini case study for this, because all of a sudden the rents were so much cheaper in the pandemic for the Tribeca commercial spaces because they were totally empty, that a new gallery neighborhood sprung up literally overnight. And I think it's just going to keep expanding in these kind of retail areas. What do you think? I mean, I don't know. Audra.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you look at where the fringe of the art world is now, that'll be, if not the center, like the median in 2 or 3 years. I mean, in Tribeca, they already had some galleries who had made the plunge and they took a risk, and look how that paid off, right? So just in general I would say, like, on the one hand, having a wider scope and just being perhaps slightly more open to opportunities that seem slightly out of left field for you, but also just on the flip side, making sure that you vet who you're working with, because it's super important. Yeah. You want to be optimistic and cautious. You want to be cautiously optimistic. Right. So that's pretty good. I think that's my endpoint. If you can handle being cautiously optimistic, there's a great future out there.
Indeed. And yeah, Marina, great prediction, especially I think as it relates, economically. For example, if the Fed raises rates, things like that, we could possibly see a recession. We're already starting to see some problems in the retail space, and that opens up some opportunities for artists and galleries to have more in-person shows. So that's a good bullish take on a very unfortunate situation. And then also I just mentioned that Jacqueline, this panel was her idea as far as all the different changes that were happening so fast and so quick. And it's like, let's bring together some folks who can, talk about how to deal with this challenging environment. So Jacqueline, thank you.
Jacqueline.
Thank you, Jacqueline. And then I guess, Audra, you shared a sales format with us, art fair. Do you want to talk to the group about that?
Yeah, that's I think a lot of times, one thing I didn't mention, but I'll keep it brief just out of respect of time, is you do have online platforms that will review your work, and it's a vetted platform. So I'm not going to mention some platforms we know that anyone can sell their work from. Again, we heard from Marina, like some dealers only want you to have a certain amount of experience before they'll show your work. But I think they're, like, especially in the past, I feel like I'm repeating myself, 2 years, you have a lot more opportunities to show your work and even to sell your work online through platforms that are specifically seeking artists who are really dedicated to their work. So I mentioned one of them is Art Fair. I know some people have had mixed experiences with it, but it's not the only one. That's just the first one that comes to mind. So some people sell through First Dibs. When it comes, something else that's interesting is when it comes to selling art online, right? Some platforms are only for galleries. We know that they'll only allow galleries to sell, and some will allow artists. Something else that's interesting in this weird space, like how we're talking about how there's a shift in retail and there may be opportunities there, is I know artists recently who have managed to sell work through Sotheby's. They have a primary market option now. So you can actually list, they select it. So it's like an art fair where they select you, right? So you can't, like, it's harder to propose that you work with them as opposed to vice versa, but they've actually moved into the primary market, which seems like a very strange strategy, but it is happening. So they have I have a page on their website now for art sales, primarily in the more of, I'd say, the contemporary fine art space, right? They're working with living artists, but that's in addition to everything else when you think of like the antiques and all their modern offerings. So there definitely is kind of a thirst and like hunger for art from, I would say, a range of industries that are not traditionally associated with the sales. I would say the work by living artists or working artists who are in their studios right now today. So you think of like how when it comes to maybe like say Ethereum, or like if you're looking at the blockchain, you think of how all of a sudden you have these NFT artworks. If you look at the auction market, they are also shifting into the contemporary art space. So there's a lot of movement.
Okay, great. Let's see if we have any more questions from the audience. Yes, we do have a question here. Do either of you have any suggestions about time management?
Can I speak to that? You know, that is one of the most common questions I get from the artists that I work with. And my suspicion is because you have so much fun creating the artwork that you could probably work 8 days a week. Now, I don't know who asked that question, but if you ask that question, or maybe just anyone here, how many of you feel like you could work 8 days a week? And how many of you do work 8 days a week? Just disclaimer, I know there are 7 days, okay, in a week. Okay, that is the number one mistake when you're doing time management. Because when you work so much every day and you have fun, you still need that time off to reset. So the number one thing I will tell you is you have absolutely got to set some time for yourself, an entire day, or maybe, check this out, 2 whole days to reset, because then you're going to be a lot more efficient the rest of the time, and it will make time management so much easier for you. And you can make your schedule work for you. It does not matter what anyone else says. There are artists who literally do not check their email for 3 days at a time. If that works for you, put a time, an away message on your email that says, hey, I'm in the studio on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and I check my emails on Mondays and Fridays. So I'll be in touch as soon as possible. If it's an emergency, you can text me, right? Something like that. So that is one of the best ways that you can really ensure that you manage your time and use it well, is when you make sure to give yourself time off and set boundaries that work for you. You do not need to check your email every day if that's not your thing, you know? I'm looking at you, Gail. I know you don't like to sit in front of the computer. Okay. You'd rather be in front of the easel. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that's a very salient point. On the flip side, the dream would be having a studio manager that handles that for you, right? But I think if you're going to scale back and sort of look at exactly how much of your time you can spend on things that are not related to the actual, say, the making of the art, having a goal and structuring reasonable and realistic use of time around that goal is really going to get you a long way. And I'll leave it at that because I know there's a lot of questions. I think some people too are raising their hands. So I'm not sure, Peter, if you have the full screen. So I just wanted to make you aware of that.
Yeah, I think they were answering the question. I think Marina asked the question and then they did the digital hand thing.
Sorry, just accidental unmute.
I think that was that Kate? I think that was Kate. I don't know if there's some other folks with hands raised. So we did have a question, I think, from Mitch. This might have already been covered. I'll just repeat it. Please speak about online purchasing of art for the advantage of the artist and resources such as Saatchi Art. Any thoughts from our panel?
Audra, you mentioned something about that. Would you like to take it away? And then
Ooh, did I? I think it's important when you're going to list artwork for sale I mean, it sounds like I'm saying the same thing over and over, but it's about your goals, right? So having visibility where you eventually want to see your work in a solo show in a museum setting is not the same goal as wanting to see sales of your work. Those are two different goals.
Yeah.
So I think if you want to see sales, then you can see exactly what platforms are already seeing sales of work that is similar to your work, and you can structure a plan around that specific goal. So, I mean, again, it's not one size fits all, and that's really the most important thing here to communicate within this frame of time here, is that if you want to sell your work and you're seeing that the work that you are making is really hot on a certain platform, or that you feel that you're working with someone who has the experience to put you on a platform where you see sales, then you should follow that goal, obviously within reason, because you're working with someone who perhaps has that experience level. But I don't rule anything out, because I look at what somebody needs and I structure a plan around that specific goal. I do think if you want to have a museum show, maybe Saatchi is not the place for you right away. But that doesn't mean that you wouldn't see sales there. So if your end game is wanting to hire a studio manager, then it might be an option for you. I think it's really about what the end game is here.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I also want to add that I'm just going to be pretty practical here when it comes to this, because like Audra said, it depends on what your goal is. If one of your biggest goals is to increase your sales, or also there's an artist that I've worked with who does these giant paintings, but also drawings, and she wanted to increase her sales. So I suggested, why not put the drawings on the online platform, and you can keep that as kind of to propel your sales, right? But that aside, right, because there's exceptions to everything. That aside, there's 3 things I want to tell you about these online sales platforms. Okay, number 1, when you put your artwork on there, have a good variety for people to choose from of different sizes and mediums and prices. 9 artworks is okay, 6 artworks is okay, but I think having too many paralyzes, others will be paralyzed by the options, right? So I would say just kind of keep it low, but a good variety. 2 is you want to make sure that you're doing everything possible. If the place approaches you, if Art Fair somehow approaches you, or Saatchi, you can ask them that in return, right, would they feature you on their website? Because that is one of the best ways to sell on these online platforms, if you get featured by one of their curators or in one of their editorials. So ask about that. How can that happen? Because that will really propel your sales, right? And 3, here's the thing. This is where it gets a little tricky. You want to make sure that you're not pricing your work in a way that will kind of blow it out of the water. You don't want to overprice your work. You want to be honest about the pricing. And that is because your collectors are going to see this work and the price publicly. And so will the galleries that, and so will, I don't know if you guys heard that motorcycle, and so will the galleries that would potentially work with you. So you want to be mindful of the pricing and don't make up the prices. And I know you guys wouldn't do that, but I'm just saying.
Thank you. No, great advice. Terry, I think Terry has a question. I think Terry might be on mute. Yeah, Terry's on mute.
Is there someone that can unmute him on the ATOA side, or them? They can help it.
I can't. Maybe someone else can.
Marina, maybe?
I'm
Jackie.
not a host, but Terry, actually, if you hover your mouse over your picture, if you see yourself, just click those 3 dots on the upper right-hand corner and select unmute. Do you see that?
Is Marina no
Actually,
longer
it's not
here in the from ATOA? Marina, not Marina.
Okay, they turned off they're getting close. They turned off the.
Okay, let's see.
All right, if you hover over your pictures, yeah, there we go. We can hear you now.
Hey, there you go.
Go ahead. Great job, Marina. Terry, yes.
Opened the gallery about a year ago on Warren Street in Hudson, and hadn't been involved in the gallery world for almost 10 years. But I spent my whole life as an artist, and that's all I did. Now I'm involved with the business of art. The thing I've noticed, and I'm curious if you've had similar experiences, but the quality of collectors and the educated collector has gone up enormously. I've had people in here who are carrying cameras, phone cameras, and listening on their earpiece with someone else who's telling them what pieces to look for and what pieces to tell them about that they could come and see. This implies to me there's a massive net of educated collectors out there, and maybe the art world needs a kick in the butt to get up to their speed. Because I've had people come in and say that piece, and that piece, and that was it. They didn't want to hear the story, or I mean, they could, and they will. But there's been a paradigm shift, I think, in collectors, and I wonder if you would agree that that's all there really is in the art world. The artist will be forever. We're always going to make art. But the collectors come and go, and we've got to nurture them like it is the play performed if there's no audience. And anyway, that's what I've seen, observed firsthand. And I'm not involved in sales at all. I have other people doing that. So, and including the social media. Have you seen any of that kind of collector?
Virtual.
Yeah.
A virtual collector that never shows up at the gallery.
Yeah.
Oh, that, okay. So not, so it's more about have we encountered someone who collects only through seeing the image and not the work in person? Is that the crux of that question?
No, they bring themselves to that point.
Mm-hmm.
And then they close on the piece. They come and see the piece themselves. Of course they do. But and these are younger people. These are people under 30, and they're seem to have the disposable income to buy the art. They're certainly doing that. But I guess what I'm really after here is where are these people coming from? They're not taught in school how to buy art.
Oh, okay. So where is the increase in interest in art collecting as, if not a vocation, then as an aspect of one's perhaps life, like having a sense of arts and culture in one's life as a younger person specifically, or just anyone? I want to make sure that I'm getting to the focus.
These are younger.
Okay.
Under 30.
Yeah, no, I think, I mean, and this is just my perspective, and I'm happy to hand it off to Marina. I think we have some background noise here, guys.
Yeah,
A little bit.
yes, pretty much.
Okay, good.
Luke
little
did
bit of
this
background noise here.
afternoon one, and then he hasn't gone since.
Oh,
Are any of the
Elaine,
moderators
Elaine?
here?
Is that
to
Elaine?
mute
Or
people?
whoever
I
has
think
not
it's
muted
Fran.
himself,
Is anyone able to?
mute yourself.
Can we mute Elaine?
Like you're retaining urine?
Fran, are you able to mute slightly?
I'm not a co-host, so I can't, unfortunately,
go.
and
I
only
think you can
Natalia
mute
She's on
and
mute.
Marina
She's
are
on mute.
the hosts.
She's
Yeah,
on
you
mute.
can mute yourself. It's where the microphone is in the bottom corner, I think, for you. Perfect. Yeah, no, it just happened and then it's perfect. Yeah, so essentially what I was going to state is I think that you have an increase as you move through the generations and wanting to just have a cultural sensibility. However that happens to translate for you, if it means that you want to have a visual aesthetic throughout your apartment, if it means you want to shape perhaps an entire art collection, it can translate as to the person who's actually wanting to collect the art, right? But I think that we've realized having the physical object either in the home or as a part of a collection has a higher meaning than only its value. Now, don't get me wrong. Some people see that artwork has value, and there has certainly been an increase in art collecting as a result of that, right? If we think of a Banksy right off the bat, that's immediately what comes to mind. But I think that people see that and the aspiration is, oh, wow, I can have some of the culture that someone, I mean, look, everyone has a different like level of taste and interest, but I think the idea is that overall, you see the prevalence of art in terms of, I would say, pop culture as a whole, it has higher stakes just across, like I would say, in a cross generational way. Marina, I'm gonna pass it to you.
Oh, yes, but I see, I don't, I have a question for you, Terry, if you could
Doug,
unmute yourself. Or, I'm sorry, I don't, so here's a question, Terry. What are you doing to advertise the gallery, if anything at all, right now? And is it a storefront?
I'm not going to be home, but
Oh,
Angela
you
can
are
let them
still
go
muted,
look.
Terry, so if you could unmute yourself.
I have to leave. I can't.
It's
Yeah, I
storefront
didn't.
through the block, 3,500 square feet. It was a photographer's place before we took it over, and it was chosen as a 5-year pop-up vanity gallery, and it's turned out to be a lot more than that. There's 19 artists in the group and a foundation that's behind them, working for them. So I was sent to Hudson to find a venue for the art center, and that's what this is. It has a stage and it does a lot of performances and other things also.
And I'm sorry, where are you located exactly? In
We're
Hudson?
it's 612 Warren, across from the CVS.
Hudson, New York.
Hudson.
It's in New York. Okay.
Yeah, but I spent
Yeah.
30 years in Tribeca.
Amazing. Great.
Leo Castelli was my sponsor in '68 to bring me to New York.
Oh,
So I got lucky
Mhm.
to have that happen.
Terry, I think the big question was, first, where are these collectors coming from? And maybe, I guess, where can you get more of them?
They're across the board. They're hardcore, upper middle class, higher than that, from all over the world. You can't draw any ethnic connections, but they've done their homework. They've read about the artists they're interested in. They have a purpose for their collection. Quick story: the ambassador of America in Russia, this a few years ago, when things were different. She hired a art consultant, and the art consultant came to the gallery we had in Soho. It was Shakespeare's Fulcrum was the gallery, and now it's here in Hudson. Anyway, the advisor comes in, the interior decorator or whatever, and says, that one, that one, that one, and that one. Those are the paintings we're taking, and I'm in a big hurry. I got a lot to do, and she leaves. The ambassador comes over, and she's standing in front of a painting, staring at it. And my wife, Valerie Shakespeare, goes over to her, and says, "This is the painting you really love, isn't it?" She says, "Yes," and it doesn't go with a damn thing. and she admitted that maybe it's best to buy the art for your heart first, and that sort of started a dialogue with a lot of other collectors. That the pieces they turned down because the price didn't seem right, and they liked or loved, they remember forever. But the pieces that they just bought and have in their homes and in their lives, they'd have to go look up how much they paid for it. I can also tell you how they get their prices. This collector is really important. And she said, whatever income you are, wherever you're from, whatever your background is, when you hear the price, you must go, huh, just a little. There should be a sting. Because it's the artist is giving up part of their life in the painting or the work of art, and the collector can represent that with cash. How much trouble do they go to get the money? And that's why you hear $150 million for a painting, because that's how they had to acquire the funds for that. Anyway, that's only from observation, not from philosophy.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it looks like we have Doug who wants to chime in. Please go ahead, Doug.
It's a question. So when you're advising, strategically advising artists, whatever their age, I find in my experience, at least going back at Artist Talk on Art, some artists are very, very consistent. That is, stylistically, they rarely change. Once they cotton on to something that seems to work for them, they stick to it ad nauseum, and they pretty much work within that confine. And then there are other artists who are seemingly all over the place. They think nothing of jumping from one style to another style for whatever their reasons. What would your advice be, particularly to younger artists, I would say, consistency or jump all over the place?
I'm jumping
Please.
out of my seat to
Okay.
answer this.
Okay.
Doug, thank you so much for this question. It is genius.
Okay.
I always tell artists that I work with that they really need to dig deep to find their intention for their work. And their intention is the umbrella under which they create anything. So when they create seemingly two disparate works of art, their intention should tie it together. And what is their intention? I have a formula for this. I always say you should look for, number one, why you are doing what you're doing, not what you're doing, because what you're doing will always change. Why are you doing what you're doing? What you have in your previous life experience or in your career or anything that, so to speak, qualifies you as an expert on this, on these themes, on what you're doing. And then you can tell us what you're doing, because that will always change. As you grow, your style will develop as well. But being a consistent artist means sticking to your intention.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I mean, I think looking at art history, you see so many compelling examples of those that jump a lot and those that absolutely don't. And some of both kinds are quite successful. There are excellent examples of people, you think of Frank Stella, who has made these quantum leaps, changes. And then you think of people that have been totally consistent. You can barely tell, a nuance of difference. So I find it fascinating that, both formulas can work. I think particularly, as you said, if people are speaking out of their true self and, staying true to whatever is truth to them, their soul.
It's called creativity, right? You have to create, and that implies it's new. I remember back in the day, you could go into a gallery in the 70s and they would hand you a manifesto. They had a statement of what they were about, what they were doing. And have you ever seen a manifesto in a gallery recently?
Not too often, currently.
Taboo.
Yeah.
I just just wanted to add, I think some people work from the concept, but I want to focus on the part of that that's really about how to get the artist from more of a point A to point B. And the answer from that perspective is who you work with, who you partner with will change. So if you work more from a formal perspective, if you're more interested in the medium, then you may be applying to open calls that are specific to that medium. If you work from the concept first, and that's how you structure your practice, you've already had amazing advice from Marina on how to parse those things out, but I think it's important to think about who you partner with. Is it a space? Is it an organization? Is it an institution that wants you to express these ideas outward to their audience? If so, then that seems like it would really work well as a potential partner. If it is a specific, say, organization for a medium, and you tend to not work in that medium, or you work across a lot of mediums, then it may not be the right fit. So you want to look at how you work, and you want to structure who you approach in terms of, say, the partners that you have as you're building out your professional career as an artist appropriately.
I personally have a muse, and that's guided me greatly. And it's an old idea, but it still works. The muse oversees what you're doing and is judgmental and critical constantly. That's the job of the muse. And I think it's a tool that isn't being used very much right now.
Yeah, the technology seems to be the muse more than the muse. I have a question. I was wondering about seeing art close up. I mean, I've had a lot of experience with computer graphics going back to the 80s, and you know, I love how far it's gone online. But then again, it's hard to see artwork online. I mean, yes, there's a lot of resolution now. I mean, we have tons of resolution, tons of bandwidth, but still, it's completely different when you walk up and see a work. I mean, I'm in Terry's gallery right now. He's got a painting up here, and it looks like it's made out of felt. And to tell you the truth, I can't tell from this distance, 10 feet away, whether it's made of felt or whether it's painted or whether it's painted on felt. And if it were digital, you couldn't tell at all. I mean, you wouldn't be able to tell what the material was. And
can I answer that? I guess I got the gist of the question. You know,
Yes.
The thing is that technology is evolving so much, and the better you are at using technology, well, you're going to get better with practice, right? But you can actually tell that it's felt if you do a close-up video or you do multiple image post with details. But while technology is still perfecting itself, one of the most important things is that you always have captions underneath the thumbnails on your website so that it is clear what the medium is, what the size of the work is, the title and the date. So yeah, this is like a big thing, but if you, if you really think about it, it's a problem that has been solved by curators already who were working on exhibition catalogs where they print these 2D images, right? And they solve that with a caption. We could do it even better with a video.
okay, so we use captions and video. Okay, that's fair.
I think just also supporting what she's saying, if you think of the medium and then how to present it as a secondary to that medium. Like if you think of a print, if it's a lenticular print, would you only show one image of it? No, you would show it as if you're viewing it from multiple perspectives. So it's really about the medium or the format first, and then figuring out a way to present it.
Okay, well, we're all familiar with drawing, and whether the drawing is this big or this big, you've got a pencil or you have some graphite or something like that, and you work the drawing for, let's say, a few hours or something. There's some, call it subtlety for lack of a better word.
Yeah, no one's disagreeing with you. I think we're all on the same page.
Peter,
Okay.
could I recommend that you take Monroe Hodder's question on the chat?
Say again?
Peter.
Okay, yes. Okay, so it looks like we have about 4 minutes to go.
Right.
But I'll take the question. The question is, I would like to ask a question about marketing. Do you recommend that people focus on marketing for a part of the of every day or every week, or do you suggest that an artist work to develop an entire body of work and then head toward marketing? Oh, good question from
It is
Monroe.
good one.
Good question. We'll let our panelists answer it.
Would you like to take it away? I feel like I've been jumping on these
Oh,
questions.
sure, absolutely. So would you repeat the last part of that? You said, should it be around a specific body of work in lieu of it being every day or every week?
Yeah, I think the question was like, should they market like every day or every week, or should they create an entire body of work and then market after they've created an entire body of work?
Yeah, me and Marina might have similar points of view on this, but I'm interested to find out. It's really up to the comfort level of the artist and the capacity in their schedule. If you're like scrambling to keep up with wanting to post every day and the posts are not good, you're not going to have the response you want from your audience. If you can post maybe 2 or 3 times a week and have all the images are really nice, you have some video, the hashtags, the captions are good, you will see a much more robust response from folks on whichever platform you happen to be using. I think of having a new body of work fully completed as an opportunity to revisit how your website is structured. So I'm not going to actually speak to that in terms of social media, but in terms of website, after you have all of the images for, say, a new body of work, hopefully you have some really high resolution, like some clean and crisp for web. These are 2 separate things, high resolution for print and for web. But the images should be really clean. The light balance is good. You have some detail shots, right? You've hired someone or you know what you're doing. That's an opportunity to see how it fits into your existing website and perhaps improve upon that. With that, I'm going to hand it to Marina because I'm sure she's had a lot of cases where she's worked on this as well.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, Audra. It really depends on your comfort level. And that is something that I alluded to also when I answered that question about time management. You really have to do this so that you're comfortable, because otherwise we'll see it, right? And comfort means authenticity. So when you're thinking about marketing, do it when it feels authentic and natural to you. Don't force yourself. I always say, and much to the detriment of all the social media gurus out there who are like, you have to post all the time, right? I think that when it comes to the art world, quality supersedes quantity, quality over quantity. Okay. So one thing I'll tell you, Monroe, I had the chance to take a quick peek at your Instagram, and this is something that I want to point out when thinking about marketing strategies, right? Don't think of it as marketing, like I said earlier. Think of it as sharing information. But you know what else you should do, every single artist here? Don't just show us the image to the screen. Like, don't just show us, I'm gonna pick up this painting. Don't just show us this, okay? You want to show us the walls around the work, because it's much more enticing for us to understand what it's like to live with the work when we see what's around it. And I work with so many artists, when they come to work with me, they just post just that image. Don't do that. Your work is more than just a 2D image. So show that it's more than just a 2D image. I think it's going to move, mountains for you. So that's one. And the other quick thing I'm going to say is, if you can think of 4 posts, that's 1 post a week for a month. If you can think of 4 things to post, right? That's not that hard. You don't have to think of 30 things to post. Right.
I'm going to use this moment to thank Peter, Audra, and Marina very, very much. I'd also like to thank Kristen Eichenberg, who coordinates the programming committee, as well as members of that committee, and Maruna Stratton and Natalia Drudnea for handling Zoom and YouTube for us so expertly, Abby Herman, our archival intern, and Emily Villarreal and Catherine Carrillo, who handled the website and social media for us. and our intrepid board of directors. And thank you all for coming and being with us tonight and for a bunch of really great questions. Thank you all for coming.